This is November Uniform 1 Uniform, your net control station for the 7:30 p.m. March 4th, 2021 Meriden Amateur Radio Club TechNet. Tonight's topic of discussion will be satellite operations. Tonight's net is being broadcast on the W1KKF/R repeater in Wallingford. Access is via 147360 with a plus offset, and the tone is 162.2. Echolink access is available on the W1 NRG-R node and also available online via Zoom. The link can be found on both the Meriden Amateur Radio Club and Middlesex Amateur Radio Society Facebook pages, and the password to the meeting when prompted is 123456. Again, the password is 123456. Yep. This tech is bi-weekly TechNet. For tonight's net, I'll be taking radio check-ins, then I'll be taking Zoom check-ins. I do have my Zoom muted so that I'm not being distracted on both the radio and Zoom. So I will tell you when I turn my speakers on so that you can talk via Zoom to me. Else, you can catch me on RF through the repeater. Yeah, I know. Please provide your call, name, and location for check-ins. There's a high probability for the calls that check in. They may be new to me, so slow and phonetically help me out. And if I have missed your call sign or have it wrong, please check in again. I'm going to give priority to Echolink and mobile stations. So any Echolink and mobile stations, please call now. Okay, nothing heard. So I'm gonna take RF check-ins first, then I'll go to the Zoom. So RF check-ins, anybody that's on the repeater, please call now. K1 LHO.
Kilo 1 Romeo Charlie Tango, Rob and Meriden.
K1 RIK.
That's a new one. Sorry.
Not currently.
N1. I didn't catch that one.
I do, and they can hear you on Zoom. No, it's not muted on Zoom, so that people know that I'm still taking check-ins. Okay, so I'm going to stop it there. The net recognizes K1LHO, W1GNP, K1RCT, K1RIK, N1KHW. I see on Zoom, and I think that's what the call was that came in, and then N1LES. If I have your call wrong or you want to still check in via RF, please call now. GMD.
Right.
N1 PRH.
Really? Vermont? Oh, he's on Echolink. That's very cool.
Okay, I got the station correction, and then I have KC1 MMC. Good to see you tonight. N1 BRL. Any other stations wishing to check into tonight's TechNet?
At W1YSM in Wallingford.
Okay, nothing heard. So on the RF side of the house, please stand by. I'm going to take check-ins via Zoom. And I'm going to unmute my speaker now.
KC1DOY, Ted in Waterbury.
K1JCF, Joe in Hamden.
KC1 KQH, John in Cheshire.
Eric, KB1JL, unmuted.
KC1 ONB, Ron in Cheshire.
KC1 CMT, Matt in Rocky Hill.
KB1RS, Rob in Griswold.
Chip and 1MIE Griswold.
K1SCI, Togi in Killingworth.
W1RJL, Rich in Marlboro.
At W1YSM in Wallingford.
KC1 NQE, Sean in Meriden.
Kilo 1 Romeo Charlie Tango, Rob in Meriden. And I think you had a guy from Vermont on Echo Link.
Yep, I sure did.
N1ZN, Jim in Wallingford.
KC1 HDB, Jeff Wallingford.
November 1 Kilo Hotel Whiskey, you're in Connecticut at Stall.
W1BOB in Avon, Connecticut. Having video difficulties, but I'm getting there.
I got you.
You got full quieting on Zoom, Bob.
Right. Let's see if I can get this.
All right, so I'm gonna go back on RF and do Zoom here. So let me mute my speakers.
WA1.
All right, we got checking in on Zoom, KC1DOY, K1JCF, KC1KQH, KB1JL, KC1OMB, KC1CMT, NB1RS, N1MIE, K1SEI, W1RJL, W1YSM, KC1NQE, K1RCT, N1ZN, KC1HDB, N1KHW, W1BOB, and I'm going to open my speaker back up to see if there's anybody on Zoom that I have missed.
I got one. K1RCT.
Yeah, correction, it was KB1RS, not NB1RS.
WA1SFH.
WB1DQT.
KC1NDK in New London, Ian in New London was on. He's having some technical difficulties, so he'll be back in Zoom in a minute.
N1PRH, Pete, West Hartford.
And we from the chat we have N1 TVL in East Haven checking in.
All right, awesome. So I didn't get the one before WB1DQT. I thought there was an 8 in the call. All right. Anyway, we got WB1DQT, KC1NDK, N1PRH, and as hearing N1TVL, and then we got KC1MEB that's checked in down on the floor over there. Any other stations for the net tonight?
Do you have Whiskey One Baker Oscar Baker? He's a new membership applicant for our club. And GMAR's guest WRJY807 in Hamden, Massachusetts. Do you have those two?
I have both of those now. So
okay,
actually,
buddy.
W1BOB I had
I got it
before, but we're good.
I thought he was. I just want to make sure because he appeared in the chat. There's another one that appears in the chat. KC1KYH, Kilo Yankee Hotel.
Okay, cool. John. Awesome. KC1KYH. All right, we got one heck of a list tonight. Let me go back on the repeater and be on mute for the speakers. Okay, so
In fact,
back on RF, for those that were listening, I apologize for the long wait. We did have a lot of Zoom check-ins. So again, rules for tonight's net is I'm going to take questions via RF first, then I'll unmute my speakers so that I can hear you on Zoom, and I will try and repeat and relay for those that are on RF and those that are on Zoom. And with that, we're going to get to the presentation. This is NU1U.
Okay, so Ann, I would like to just state to the people on Zoom, if you could please mute yourself.
Rob, I cannot share my screen. Are you in control of being host again?
Give me a second.
You're on
I
mute,
didn't
Rob.
catch you there, Rob. You were muted.
Sorry. Yeah, you should be all set, Ann.
Okay, technical difficulties are going away. Things are starting to work now. Let's see. New share,
I have to mute.
share, and share. Share the screen. Share. All right, I think we're good. Everybody in video that can see my screen, please give me a thumbs up so that I have some confirmation that you're seeing it. All right, awesome. So this is November Uniform 1 uniform. I've been a hand for a couple of years. I have dabbled in a whole lot of different things. Tonight's presentation is going to be on satellite operations. If you wish to contact me after this net to ask me any questions, I can be contacted via Gmail, Twitter, or you can check out my QRZ page. I'm good there, and you can contact me by just pulling up the email on QRZ. This is November Uniform 1 uniform, and what tonight's presentation is going to be is kind of a brain dump. So I'm not a complete expert with satellites, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So I will be able to show you basically the who, what, when, where, why, and most importantly, how of satellite operations. So we're going to get to the how, which is the thing that everybody's probably here to see, but we want to go through everything prior to the how, just to make sure everybody's on the same playing field and has a 101 level grasp of satellite operations. NU1U for ID. So what is working satellite or satellite operations? What working satellite operations is that there are satellites orbiting the Earth, and when they are within when they're within sight of your station, you're able to work them. So as the satellites are passing around the globe, they're either going to be geostationary, which means that you're always going to be able to see it, or it's going to be orbiting the planet so that you will have certain time frames that you're able to work the satellite. Now, the satellite acts much like a repeater on Earth, except it's up in the sky. And instead of a typical repeater where you have a single frequency that you're working with an offset for transmit and receive, typically you're working two completely different frequencies. So you're transmitting on one and you're receiving on another. The birds that I work are usually 70 centimeter and 2 meter satellites. So that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. I'm not. NU1U for ID. So the types of satellites that we have, there's FM repeater satellites, which are considered easy satellites. Then there's linear transponders, which will handle single sideband and CW. Then there's other satellites that I haven't used, so we're just going to mention them here, which is digital satellites that have packets that do packet, all the different digital modes. Then there's specialty mode satellites that do digital voice. And then there's ones that do telemetry only. You're just going to be able to pull telemetry data from the satellites that are broadcasting it. At least I believe that's what it is. So don't quote me on that. But we're going to talk about FM repeaters and linear transponders as the satellites of choice tonight. NU1U for ID. So who can work satellites? This is really cool for new hams or hams that haven't upgraded to general yet. Most of the satellites that I'm going to be talking, well, actually all the satellites that I'm talking about that I've worked are ones that you can use your technician privileges for. You have 70 centimeter, the 420 through 440 megahertz band. Then you have the 2 meter band, the 140 through 148 megahertz band. So because you have, as a technician, privileges to work both of those bands, you can work satellites. So you don't need to upgrade to general or extra in order to make long distance contacts, because that satellite enables you to relay as a repeater type of operation to stations that are also able to see the bird at the exact same time. All right, so now we're at the when of satellite operation. As far as when you can operate the satellites is when the satellite is visible to you from wherever you happen to be. And there's a couple of ways you can figure out when the satellite's coming by. I have a couple of different things shown here. One on the left was Christmas Eve, and that's why you see Santa Claus and the reindeer there. But the line that you see going across the planet, that's the path of the satellite. Then the satellite over in the upper right-hand side is SO50, and the circles around it that actually go over to the left-hand side of the screen there is the footprint of the satellite. So that's what the satellite is able to see from where it is up in space. If you are within that ring, you might be able to hit it depending if there's no obstructions like hills or buildings or whatever. So as far as when it's going to hit you, you can watch this program and see when it's going to come across your path. Here it's showing that the SO50 is going to rise in 9 hours and 24 minutes. NU1U for ID. So on the right-hand side of the screen is screen caps that I took on my phone, which is a program called Heavens Above, and it shows all of the different times that you can potentially see satellites, what their elevation is going to be, and what the time range will be for its visibility and workability to you. Then further over, you can actually see the path, and all that information below it is all the times that you can actually work the satellite. So you can only work a satellite if you can see it and it can see you. So next up, we're talking where can you work satellites? And on here, I show a grid master map, which shows all of the grids across the United States, well, the continental United States, not including Alaska or Hawaii. And really what you're trying to do when you're working satellites is work different grids. Now, you can do satellite operations from home. You can do satellite operations on the road. It's really not limited by where you are, but what equipment you're using and when you're able to see the bird. So as far as where to operate satellites, it can really be anywhere. Sorry, everyone. Bean was looking for some drinks. All right, so now we're at why of working satellites. And these are a couple of the reasons why I work satellites. Making a contact through a satellite is really cool. It's a great feeling. A lot of things have to go right in order to make a contact through the satellite, especially the first time that you're working a satellite. You have where the satellite is, the orientation of the antenna, if you're able to break through the pileups, if you're able to hear yourself, there's a lot of things that have to go right in order to actually make a contact on a satellite. But when it happens, it's really cool. So it's a great feeling. That's one of the reasons why I work satellites. It's a little bit more exciting than other ham radio modes of operation. NU1U for ID. So a couple other things. There are awards that you can get for working satellites. That map that I showed you before, if you work enough of those grids, you can get awards, and ham radio is all about printing out awards and throwing them up on your wall. The other thing is QSL cards. If you want a physical thing from playing ham radio, I found a high return rate of QSL cards on the satellite operations. So if you send out QSL cards for most of your satellite contacts, I think I got a 85% return rate on QSL cards. So I have a binder here that I have been keeping all of my QSL cards in. And I do have a couple of QSL cards from folks that are listening in right now. And I thank you very much. It's really cool to get something in the mail after you've worked someone who had enough things go right to actually make the contact working satellites. Okay, so before I move on to the how, which is a great majority of this presentation, I'm going to take questions from RF first and then see if there's anybody on Zoom that has any questions. So are there any questions on the RF side of the house? Please call now. K1RCT with a question, go ahead. Okay, so for everyone that was on Zoom, we got a question about the app that I had shown on the screen. And the app that I showed on the screen is called Heavens Above. It's an Android app. There's also equivalents for for Apple phones. I don't know what they are. I don't have an Apple phone, but Heavens Above I found a lot of success using. And there's also other ones that you can use, but that's the one that I use for the majority. And the other question was, is this going to be available on YouTube? The answer is yes. And Rob, I clicked record to cloud. So did I click the right button? Okay, so for everyone on the Zoom meeting, I got positive confirmation that we are recording this meeting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my turn my speakers back off of mute and listen to any questions from Zoom. So everyone on RF that's listening, please stand by. All right, questions on Zoom. Does anybody have any questions right now? All right. Nothing heard on Zoom. So I'm going to mute my speakers again.
Yep, nothing on the, wait, I've got one from Heavens Above is available on iOS, but also on iOS is ISS detector for .99 cents. You can unlock all of the, okay, that really wasn't a question, sorry. So nothing else on Zoom.
Yep,
Go ahead.
no worries. Thanks for the info. It's good because I didn't know. All right, we're back on RF. So what we're going to do now is go into the majority of the presentation, which is how do you work satellites? We all know now why, when, exact, all that sort of stuff. And we're going to start with working FM satellites. So FM satellites, what we're going to do is work just like we're working a repeater, except again, we have two frequencies that we're using. We're not, I don't want to say two frequencies, two bands. So with SO50, which is one of the FM satellites, you're going to uplink on 2 meters, and the frequency for doing that is 145.85. And then listening on that satellite, for the most part, you're going to be on 436.795. So sending up, when you're transmitting, it's 145.850. When you're listening, you have to listen on 436.795. You can set that with half duplex radios and listen and then transmit on a different frequency, and you're going to have some success. But as I'm going to go into further on down the line in this presentation, full duplex is where you want to be working satellites.
This is the app you can use.
That's fine. The additional information for working SO50 is you have a PL tone that you need to use, and the satellite has a 10-minute timer that you need to arm using a different tone, keying it up for 2 seconds. And over on the right-hand side, which is going to be that shift RX frequency to adjust for Doppler, I've shown the downlink frequencies that you have to switch to as the satellite moves across the sky. So like I said, for the most part, you're listening on 436.795, but that's not always the case because there's going to be Doppler shift, and I'm going to talk about Doppler shift on the next slide. NU1U for identification. But before I move on to the Doppler shift on the next slide, I just want to say that because these are considered the easy birds to work, the reason why they're the easy birds to work is because you can use an HT, you can use transceivers that you would normally use for regular everyday ham radio operations on UHF, VHF. The only thing that you might need to adjust is the antenna that you're using. And I say might need to adjust because you might have luck using just whatever you have, HT with the rubber ducky, or even Omni on the top of your house. But that's going to be with some luck. Okay, so the Doppler effect, that range of frequencies that I was showing on the downlink that you have to switch to as the satellite is working across the sky. There's 3 phases. There's 3 different terminologies that you need to use as the satellite's coming across the sky. When you first are able to see it, it's called acquisition of signal. That's when the satellite is starting to approach you. You can just start to see it. And when it's on the other side of you, when it's gone across the sky, now you're starting to lose it. That's called loss of signal. And when it's closest to you is when it's right in the middle of those 2, and that's called the time of the closest approach. So as you have that satellite come across the sky, the frequency on UHF especially is going to change because of this thing called the Doppler effect. And if you want an easy way to think about it, when a car is coming by you going really, really fast and it's honking its horn, you hear it at a high pitch when it's coming at you. And then as it's going away from you, you hear it at a lower pitch. That's exactly what's happening with the satellite as it's coming toward and going away from you, is that frequency is changing, getting greater or lower depending on the uplink, whether it's UHF uplink or UHF downlink. So this is NU1U for identification. When you're transmitting on UHF, which was not the case with SO50, you have to adjust the uplink. When you're listening on UHF, you have to adjust the downlink as the satellite's passing. And you can actually see that if you have a waterfall when it's on the downlink, because you'll see it traveling either up or down, depending on, well, actually, you'll see it traveling down if you're working the satellite as the Doppler comes across. So as you can see on the previous slide, you start higher than the frequency that's advertised that the satellite's listening on, and it comes down as it travels across the sky. You will actually see that on a waterfall as it moves. All right, so that's FM satellites in principle and how they work. So I'm going to take questions from RF first and then see if there's any questions on Zoom. All right, nothing heard on RF. Now I'm going to go to Zoom and unmute my speaker. So RF, please stand by. Any questions on Zoom?
Yeah, it's a W1YSM. I didn't understand the 10-minute tone that you were talking about.
Okay.
I didn't understand that.
So it's not a, let me get on RF. So the question was, didn't understand the 10-minute tone. So there is no 10-minute tone. What it is there's a 10-minute timer. So the satellite will turn off. It's RF listening or for voice because it wants to save battery. So you have to arm the satellite to actually work it with a 2-second tone, and it'll arm the timer for 10 minutes. So when the satellite's coming across the sky and there's no one working it because it's up over the ocean, there's no point in using the satellite killing its battery when it's in the eclipse. So you need to arm the satellite in order to actually use it. Does that answer the question?
I've never done that because every time I've worked a satellite, it's always been a pileup of sorts. So someone else must have activated it. Because this is AO91. I've never had to put anything in for a 10-minute timer.
Yeah, so AO91 doesn't have a 10-minute timer, and as far as I know, it's actually not in operation right now, but not all of the satellites have a timer they have to arm. SO50 is the only one that I'm aware of that has that timer. So that's just the satellite I use for an example.
Okay, thank you.
K1RCT.
All right, K1RCT, go for it.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Ed. Yeah, so as Dan said, SO50 is the only one that has the 10-minute timer. And what I've always done, and I've made probably 95% of my contacts on SO50, was when I know that that satellite is cresting or becoming into sight range, I'll just transmit that 74, what is it? 74.4 to enable the timer to make sure that that thing is on. If it's already on, what you do setting up a signal is not going to matter much. It's going to be on for that 10-minute segment. But I've made most of my contacts on that satellite, and I don't think any of the other satellites have such a timer. Maybe that's why that thing has survived for so long up in the atmosphere, extended, no, up in the vacuum of space, and been able to work so many of us as it keeps circling the globe. Back to net from K1RCT. I've got
Thanks,
chat.
Rob. I see message in chat, and then I see a hand raised. So the message in chat is how long from point the sat appears to disappears across the sky.
Wow.
It depends is the answer to that. So I'm going to break to let the repeater reset.
That's a good question.
Okay, so I'm going to mute my speakers again. All right, so the answer to that is, again, it depends. If the satellite is very low as far as it's coming across as a pass, so when the satellite comes across and what you can see, it's usually on your application or whatever happens to be that you're using to track the satellites, shown in degrees across the sky with height relative to a 90-degree perpendicular line from your vantage point on Earth, flat across the ground, to 90 degrees being straight up in the sky. So with a 90-degree pass, that's going to give you the most amount of time to see the satellite because it's going from wherever it's at across the top of you and then setting. That can be anywhere between 20 minutes to 10 minutes. If it's any lower, it gives it less time for you to actually see it. So the pass, depending on how low it is, you might only have a minute, 2 minutes. They're very quick. So there's a lot of activity on satellites as it's coming across the sky because you only have a certain time frame to hit it. And that time window is very, very small. And it feels a whole lot smaller when you're actually trying to work it and you're listening to stations and you're trying to jump in so that you can actually work other stations, especially on an FM satellite. So with the FM satellite, because it's an easy satellite and you're only transmitting and receiving on one frequency up, one frequency down, it acts just like a repeater. Only one person can use it at a time. So it makes it very, very busy. It's like a pile up on DX. I hope that answers the question. The answer is it depends, and it's usually under 10-ish minutes. And then the other question I saw was from K1SCI, so go for it.
Yeah, on the SO50 satellite, yeah, I can understand the need to adjust the Doppler on receive, but why not on transmit? Is there another guy up on the satellite who's adjusting it on that receiver for you?
So the question that was asked in Zoom was, how come you don't have to change it on the uplink? Because 2 meter, the Doppler doesn't actually get affected enough for your transceiver to not transmit or hear, depending on whether it's on the uplink or the downlink. That window of wiggle room, even though there is a little bit of Doppler shift, it's not enough so that the satellite can't hear you or you can't hear the satellite. So typically, if you're on an FM bird, on this one going up, you don't need to adjust the uplink frequency. If it's a different bird where it's the downlink frequency, your transceiver, your HT or your base station, whatever it is, that Doppler shift isn't great enough so that it can't play the audio for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, the Doppler's, V over lambda, and so lambda is 4 times bigger on 2 meters, so the Doppler shift is actually 1/4, but it's still 2.5 kilohertz or so, or more on that chart. So I guess it just depends upon how they can capture it. Maybe they have a wide enough circuit to capture it and follow it. I mean, you can track it.
Right. I've actually seen it on the waterfall on my 9700 move, and I've not moved with it, and I can still hear it just fine. So it works. Does that make sense, Togi?
Yeah.
All right, cool. I see another hand raised. K1NDK, go for it.
KC1NDK. Awesome. So my question was, it sounded like you just answered it, that you aren't chasing the receive frequency as it passes overhead, you're just leaving it set. Is that correct?
So the receive frequency on this bird, you do have to change. So
Okay.
uplink you can keep the same. You don't need to worry about changing that when you're transmitting. Downlink though, is it's coming across the sky. As you got the acquisition of signal, you're going to be up higher than the frequency should be so that you can hear it. And then as it passes across the sky, you're constantly changing frequencies so you can still hear it. If you don't change those frequencies, you're not gonna hear folks on the bird.
Gotcha. It'll completely drop out on you. You'll lose all sound of it.
Yeah. So the challenge is you're either going to lose all sound or it's going to be very light. And you have a couple things you're working with when the satellite's coming across the sky. You're not just working with frequency, you're working with polarization of the antenna, which can also cause a loss of signal. And then if you're not even pointing at the bird, there's another reason that you're going to lose signal. So there's a lot of different things that can make it so that you can't hear that satellite. So you want to give your best possible chance of hearing that satellite by adjusting the Doppler.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you.
Yep. Are there any other questions on Zoom?
Comment K1RCT.
Go for it.
Thanks, Sam. Perfect presentation. I just want to point out, when you're just getting into this part of the hobby, if you're going to get into satellites, only be concerned about Doppler shift on the 440, the 70 centimeter side. Don't be so concerned. You can be concerned if you want to be for 2 meter side, and make Doppler adjustments to be perfect. But that's only for people that are perfectionists. You don't need to do it. Just be concerned about Doppler effect. Think about a siren. As you're standing on a street side, a siren comes at you. It's a higher pitch. It reaches you, it's normal. And as it goes away, it lessens. That's the same thing that happens in satellite, much like Ant's presentation on the horn. But I found that trying to adjust for 2-meter Doppler is just not going to get you anything that that you don't already have. Just focus on the 440 megahertz or 70 centimeter side of Doppler shift, but pay attention to it coming and going. Learn about that and study some manuals or study some of these websites that we can all access. There's a lot of tutorials out there that will teach you about Doppler shift and tell you the same thing that I'm telling you right now. Focus on 70 centimeter. Thanks, Ant. Back to Net from K1RCT.
All right, K1RCT, thank you very much for that. I am going to mute my speakers again for Zoom and carry on with the presentation. We're about halfway through the slides now, so we're doing a pretty good pace here. And we're now talking about working linear satellites, which are not the easy birds. And the reason why they're not the easy birds is because it's a little bit more challenging to work these. So the example that I have up here is CAS4A, and I'm going to pause for the repeater. NU1U for identification. So the linear satellites, when you're working those, you're working them usually either with a single sideband or you can work them CW. Now there's two different ways in which the satellite can operate. Inverting or non-inverting. So those frequencies that I was telling you about on the FM satellites, there's a frequency assigned for the uplink and there's a frequency assigned for the downlink. With linear satellites, you get a pass band. You get a certain frequency range that you can play with on the uplink and the downlink. Now, the way that the satellite works is that it's either going to invert the uplink downlink frequency or it's not going to invert it. And what that means is that for this particular satellite, it's an inverting one, which means that as you go down in VHF frequency, you're going up in UHF frequency. So the downlink here is going to be upper sideband VHF. And if you're moving across the passband going down between the ranges of its frequencies that you can use, if you want to hear someone or yourself on that satellite, you need to be on the frequency that matches on the inversion. So instead of going down, you're going up on those frequencies. And I'm going to pause for the repeater. All right, so what we're doing here when working a linear satellite is we're picking some frequency inside of that passband. On the uplink, it's going to be 435.21 to 435.23. And then on the downlink, it's going to be 145.86 to 145.88. Now, again, we are having to take into consideration the Doppler shift. So on each one of the frequencies that you're listening to, you can't just hang out on the frequency that is on the inversion. You need to find yourself on the satellite with whatever frequency the satellite you need to adjust for the satellite to hear you and relay on the expected downlink frequency. So I'm going to pause for the repeater again. NU1U for ID. So with this example here, this is part of a chart that KE0PBR came up with and has on his website at this link here. Super helpful. He's got it for, I think, all of the satellites that you can work either linear or FM on voice, and the chart's just invaluable, because if you're working this without computer correction and you want to be able to have some kind of frame of reference as far as where you need to start to find yourself on the satellite, you can just kind of pick one of these frequencies and adjust your uplink so that when you're speaking into the satellite, you can then hear yourself. And that's called finding yourself on a linear satellite. Because if you don't find yourself on the satellite and you try and make a contact, you'll be talking on a frequency that you can't hear, and you're not actually making contact with someone because you're not on the same uplink downlink frequency that that other person is. So it's much more important on the linear satellites to be able to hear yourself than on the FM satellites. On the FM satellites, it's a little bit more forgiving. If you transmit and you can't hear yourself, the satellite can likely hear you, and other people can likely hear you on the satellite, and they can come back to you. On a linear satellite, you need to be able to hear yourself to know that you are on the same two frequencies, both uplink and downlink, as the other person you're trying to make contact with. So there's a lot more going on with the linear satellites, but there's more opportunity to have multiple stations working that satellite at the same time. Whereas an FM bird, you're only able to make contacts one at a time. On a linear satellite, you can pick a spot on that passband and try and make contacts with folks, either calling CQ or responding to a CQ. So it's a little bit more relaxed than an FM bird, but you do need to be able to find yourself. So before I move on to more of the presentation, I just want to answer any questions about working linear satellites. So we'll go to the RF stations first. Are there any RF stations with questions? Please call now. All right, nothing heard. I'm going to assume that a lot of folks are on the Zoom meeting here. So I don't know if anybody's listening on RF, but that's what our nets are for hams that are either listening on RF or folks that can just pick us up and want to listen. So with that, I have my speakers unmuted. Are there any questions from Zoom?
KC1DOY.
All right, KC1DOY, I heard you. Go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, maybe I'm missing something here. Since you've got the frequencies changing, how do you know when to go to the next one in line? I'm seem to be a little confused on that.
Okay, so the question was, since we got a lot of frequencies here, how do you know how to go to the next one in line? So the way that you know to go to the next one in line is because if you don't hear yourself, then you need to move. That's when you know that you need to move. These are just general guidelines as far as what frequency to use. You have a better chance of hearing yourself if you start on this, on those frequencies, depending on where it is in the sky. So when you're first able to see the bird, you want to be, if you're, say you're listening to 145870, square in the middle of this chart here, is that bird's initially coming up, where you want to quote unquote find yourself is on 435210. Now, as that's working itself across the sky, you can do these 5 kilohertz jumps as it's moving across the sky, or you can kind of tune with the VFO knob to get yourself able to hear as you're transmitting as it works itself across the sky. So there's no hard set rule as far as when you're flipping to the next one. You just want to be able to hear yourself. On the FM birds, you're not always hearing yourself, so you kind of want to flip when you see it coming up and then kind of in the middle before it's at its closest to you, then flip it when it's kind of close to you, being in the middle of the pass, and then keep on doing that on the other side. On the linear satellites, as you're making a contact, it's more of a free-flowing conversation. You kind of want to spin your VFO knob, I keep saying VHF knob, VFO knob, so that you're tracking the satellite across the sky and you're changing your frequency as the Doppler is changing. So the way that you know, short answer, is you'll hear yourself if you're on the right frequency. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. That clarifies it.
Cool.
K1RCT.
K1RCT's got a question.
Thanks.
for it.
It's an observation. And this is in reference to KC1DOY. How I liken it to is when you're transmitting on a frequency or you're listening, no, if you're listening to a frequency on FM and you hear a guy that's like maybe 5 kilohertz off, he sounds like he's 5 kilohertz off. You're going to hear static, you're going to hear noise in his transmission. And that's the effect of Doppler. When you're hearing someone on a Doppler repeater, essentially it's a repeater in space or a repeater in orbit. And if you're not on the right Doppler frequency for a downlink of on the 70 centimeter band, he's going to sound like he's off frequency. The reality is you're off frequency according to Doppler. So you're going to want to adjust 5 kilohertz up, 5 kilohertz down. You're going to find that guy by varying your VFO. That's the simplest explanation I can, and that's what makes sense in my mind when I'm trying to make contacts on FM satellite. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation. Back to net from K1RCT. That's it, Ant. Get it?
I got it. Sorry, I didn't unmute myself on Zoom. Are there any other questions on Zoom before I actually transition into what a satellite pass sounds like? I think Rob kind of teed it up for me. I was going to do this at the end, but for folks that haven't heard a satellite pass, I think these two are pretty good examples of what you would expect to see on a satellite pass. So are there any questions before we go to that?
Yeah,
W1YSM. W1YSM.
Go for it, Ed.
When I do the AO91, you're supposed to turn the power down to 10 watts and not much more. Is that true for linear satellites too?
Yeah, so you're actually skipping ahead to something about satellite etiquette, but yes, you want to use as little power as possible to do what you need to do on the satellites. In some satellites, if you're sending too much signal, you can actually turn them off. On the linear birds, I believe that it's sharing power on the different frequencies on the downlink, and it will send as strong of a signal as it hears. So if you're being too strong, you can crowd out everybody else on the satellite. At least that's what I've been told. I don't know if I've seen it in practice, but you want to use as little power as possible on the satellites to accomplish your goals, which is make the contact. And HTs will work on FM birds. They don't have a whole lot of power. On linear satellites, it's the same deal. You don't need all that much power in order to get into the birds.
Yeah,
okay, so
K1SCI.
K1SCI's got a question. Go for it.
This especially with these linear repeaters, constantly changing the transmit and receive, maybe even, in different directions, depending upon if it's inverting or not. It sounds like there should be an app that does that for you. Is there something like that? You're smiling, so there must be. Are you going to write one?
So the question is there an app to help with all of this? Absolutely. The first time I worked a linear bird, I tried doing it manually with a chart, and it was an abysmal failure. There's so much going on with satellite passes that I couldn't keep track of Doppler and learn how to work linear satellites without an app. So you can connect SAT PC32 is what I use. USB cable to my IC9700, it will take care of Doppler for you. So all you need to do is spin the dial to whatever frequency you want to transmit on, or you hear someone, and it will adjust that Doppler on both VHF and UHF for you. So you can do this manually, and it's hardcore, or you can do it with an app.
KC1NDK, can you repeat the name of the app that you just used?
All right, so the name of the app is SAT PC32. There are others, that's the one that you can buy through AMSAT. It does its job well. It also can do rotor control, which I'll be getting to as far as the stuff that you can use, the equipment that you can use. But it's worked great for me, and it's very straightforward interface. You just tell it the satellite to track, you click cat control, it'll take control of your radio and adjust Doppler for you automatically.
Roger, thank you.
Any other questions on Zoom before I play what a satellite pass sounds like? All right, so for those that are on RF, I am going to be playing some audio samples that I'm not going to play on the RF side, just on the Zoom side, so that folks can hear. So I'll be back in approximately 5 minutes. This is NU1U. Okay, folks, so the first pass we're going to have is an FM pass. That FM pass is going to be a lot a bit more hectic, and you're going to hear it like it happens going across the sky as a repeater. So please give me a thumbs up if you can hear it once I start playing it, just so that I know that everybody's hearing it.
UTC 2021-02-14. This is pass RS 44. It is 1949 and 6 seconds.
Sorry, everyone. So this isn't the FM pass. It actually started playing the linear pass. So we're going to hear the linear pass first.
UT 44. It is 1949 and 6 seconds.
CQ satellite. This is Kilo Charlie 1, Mike Echo Bravo. CQ satellite. This is Kilo Charlie 1, Mike Echo Bravo. I got two people talking over each other. November 8, Mike Radio. November 8, Mike Radio. November 8, Mike Radio. We are Fox November 31. QSL, we're in Echo November 82, 73. 73, gotcha. November 4, Lima, Alpha Zulu. This is KC1 NEB, Fox November 31. Whiskey 2, is that Fox? Whiskey 2, Zulu, Foxtrot. Whiskey 2, Zulu, Foxtrot. Roger, roger, I'm in Foxtrot November 30. Foxtrot November 30. Foxtrot November 30. That's on the log. QSL 73. QSL 73. November 4, Lima, Alpha Zulu, Echo Mary 95. November 4, LED, I got in the log. This is Kilo Charlie 1, Mike Echo Bravo, Fox Nancy 31. QSL, thanks a lot, 73. 73.
Okay, so for those of you that are on the RF, we just played a linear pass. I'm going to be explaining that. Well, actually, I can explain it on the RF and on the Zoom meeting. What you just heard is being KC1 MEB working stations on RS-44. That satellite has a very large pass band. So she was able to plunk down and start calling CQ satellite on the satellite as we worked it across the sky. Not only does it have a large pass band, it also has a long time to be in the sky because it's further out into space. So this is just a clip of what she worked. I think she worked like 10 stations just in the single pass. And it's because it's such a large amount of room that multiple stations can work on the satellite at the same time. The challenge is actually tuning it so that you don't hear that weird-ish sound in the voice where it sounds like it's off, and that's kind of what Rob was talking about with Doppler. When the linear satellites, not only do you have Doppler, but you also need to find yourself on the satellite and try and correct for the audio. But close is good enough on the linear birds because everybody else is trying to do the same thing, correct for Doppler, make sure that your antenna is polarized correctly, pointing at the satellite, etc. So as long as you can make the contact, you can hear the person on the linear bird, you just do what you can as far as finding yourself on that satellite. Now you're going to hear the FM pass on the Zoom meeting. I'm not going to retransmit it over RF. And it's going to feel and sound a whole lot different on this FM pass because it's one frequency up, one frequency down. Everybody's trying to work the satellite at the exact same time.
Foxtrot. KN2K, N2FYA, FN41, KN2K. QSL N2FYA from KN2K. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, N2FYA. AC90, N5VO, Truck Row, Reco Mike 90. N5VO, N2FYA, FN41.
FYA, this is NU1U. I'm in Fox November 31.
Okay, NU1U, N2FYA, FN41. QSL and N5VO, N2FYA, FN41.
N2FYA, N5VO, row record 90.
NU1U from KN2K, Fox Mike 18. N5VO, K2MWS, Fox.
Okay, so for those on the RF, we just heard a FM bird pass, and there was a whole lot of difference in that from the linear satellite. The FM pass, there's a lot of folks calling other stations. There's a lot of back and forth. The audio's not as distorted because it's FM versus a single sideband and being right on frequency. And sometimes folks are jumping on top of each other to make the contact. So if you were listening in there, I didn't realize that there was a station calling for another station, and I called out for that station. They came back to me, but then they went and additionally called for the station that they were originally calling for. And then later on the pass, someone called out to me because they heard my call and I didn't even hear him, so I didn't come back to him. It's a lot more frantic on the FM bird, but it's an easy satellite because it's a lot easier to hit. So with that, I'm going to see if there's any questions in general.
W1YSM. Going back to AO91 again, I have found that it's a lot easier to make these contacts at 1 o'clock in the morning, as you might expect. Not on a weekend, actually, because more people are up weekends at 1 in the morning than weekdays. So I stay up, and I've made about 20 or 30 contacts, with including the N2FYA that you just mentioned there. I think he's in Groton, Connecticut. It's actually not so bad. If you try to do it at noon on a Sunday, you forget about it because it's a gigantic pileup. But I found it very rewarding. You learn how to make a real quick contact, say QSL, and go on to the next one, or get off the band so that other people can make contacts. So there is definitely a cadence to the FM. I haven't done any linear, so that would be interesting to try that. But that's pretty much what it really sounds like.
Thanks. So Ed just was explaining to us that it's easier to hit the FM satellites either really late or early morning passes. I would add on to that also if the bird is out over the ocean. So if the path of the satellite is further out into the Atlantic Ocean and you can hit it, there's a lot fewer stations that are able to hit that bird, usually the East Coast. If it's coming across the middle of the country or a little bit further in, you're going to have a lot more stations that are competing for that that satellite's time. So midday, middle of the weekend, there's so many stations on those FM satellites that you're going to have trouble. Something that I was going to get to later on is another thing that makes it a little bit easier on the FM birds is if you know someone's going to be on that FM bird. So if you schedule a contact with someone and say, I'm going to be on the pass 1742 Zulu of SO50, and you say, okay, cool, I'll see you on the satellite. You can not blind call, but you can call out for that station on the satellite because you know they're there, and then they can come back to you because they heard you, they were waiting, and they were expecting. So you can pre-schedule your contacts on a satellite. It still counts as a contact, but it makes it easier if you're able to do that. So we're gonna see if there's any more questions from Zoom. Oh, we got KC1HDB raise their hand, so go for it.
Hey, KC1HDB. Thank you for the recordings. That really got me excited to try this. Question related to my time in the sky question. And I know the answer is kind of depends on this one too. But in general, what's the furthest length that you can make a contact with a satellite? Assuming you are farthest from the satellite and the other contact is farthest as well.
I think the record is 3,000 miles. I'm not positive, but so long as the satellite can see you and the other station can also see the satellite, and you're able to get a signal into it, you can make the contact. So there was a pass of one of the FM birds. I believe there was it really doesn't matter. I made a contact out in California and I wasn't even expecting to. So you can easily hit this this map here of the United States working satellites. Easy peasy. If the satellite's coming across the middle of the country and you can see it, the other side of the country can also see it, and you can make the contact. The only thing that is going to be a little bit difficult filling this map up is there's flyover states, and I've flown to Vegas, and there's a lot of nothingness in some of the country. So in order to make contacts in areas of this grid that there aren't normally folks that are ham radio operators, those that are called rovers will tell other operators or just go do it from one of these rare grids. And whenever somebody roves to a grid, they're king of the satellite. They're the ones that everybody's trying to contact. They're usually going to take the majority of the time on that pass because everybody needs that grid. And then same thing on a linear satellite. They'll tell you what frequency they're going to be on, what grid square they're going to be in, and then you tune to that frequency ahead of time so that you know you can make that contact in that grid square. Hopefully that answers the question and some more.
Yeah, helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions before I move on? All right, cool. I'm going to mute my speakers again and head further into the presentation. Okay, so I flipped a few slides ahead, but as far as the FM satellites, here's what you need to work them. The idea is that you want full duplex. You don't need full duplex. You can work a satellite with a single HT program to transmit up on one band and listen on another band. I don't recommend that. I mean, if you want to start getting into satellites and you don't want to purchase anything else, try it. But you're not going to make friends on the satellite because you might be either going over the top of someone or you might not even be making the satellite. You have no clue because you can't hear the satellite at the same time you're transmitting. Half duplex. So in order to get full duplex, there's a multitude of different ways you can do that. You can get an HT that does full duplex. Now, the one that I have up on the screen there is the Kenwood TH-D72A, which has been discontinued. You can still purchase it, but Kenwood's not making them anymore. So if you want to get into satellites and you want a full duplex radio, this is a good one to get. If you can get it either on eBay or refurbed, or you can still buy it on whatever your favorite ham radio store is. NU1U for ID. The other thing that you can do is you can use a full duplex dual band mobile rig. So I actually have that radio here, and if I had a duplexer set up, I could use that as well on the antennas that I have. That's another option. You're going to want to work at low power on this. You're not going to want to transmit at the full 50 watts or 25 watts that it's able to produce, but it's another option. Another way that you can work the satellites is if you have two HTs. You're going to use one for transmitting and one for receiving. So basically you turn the volume almost off on the one that you're using for transmitting. And then the other one you're going to have listening to the satellite. So as you're transmitting with one radio, you're listening with the other. If you can hear yourself in the satellite when you're trying to make a contact, congratulations. Not only have you worked yourself, well, you're able to hear yourself on the satellite, but you know that you're making it into the satellite, and you know whether you're stepping on someone. So it's good to work full duplex, no matter how you do it. That's the way that you want to work satellites. So it can be done half duplex on an FM repeater, not recommended. As far as antennas working FM satellites, usually you're working with an HT. So the one that I showed here is a directional Yagi antenna. This brand is an Aero brand, and it has a built-in duplexer so that you can use the single antenna from this Kenwood TH72A, plug it right in, and you're good to go. You can use both the VHF and UHF elements on this antenna. If you don't have a duplexer and you want to connect to like this Kenwood here, you could take another duplexer outside of the duplexer that's built into this Aero and use that as well. So there's a little bit of duplexing that you need to do to turn the one output on the radio into two for the antenna, the UHF and the VHF side of the house. So I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions on the Zoom meeting about just working an FM satellite with full duplex.
N1PRH. I was just wondering if the new Kenwood D74A is full duplex. Do you know?
I don't believe it is. I'd have to check, but I'm pretty sure it's not. So if you have one, just use another radio. So use two. Any other questions? All right, we're moving on to linear transponder radios. And what I'm showing here is just examples. There's more, but these are the examples that I wanted for the presentation that I'm giving. If you want an all-in-one box, this is what I have. It's a really good radio. It's the IC9700. It has a waterfall. It has full duplex. So you can see in the back here, there's an output for VHF. There's an output for UHF. And then there's 1200 megahertz, I believe. So yeah, 1200 megahertz over here. These are N connectors. These are either the PL or the SO connector. I'll never get those right in my head. But if you want to work satellites with a single radio that makes it a lot a bit simpler and has a waterfall, I would recommend this one here. That's what I use. So to adjust for Doppler shift, there's a USB connection here, and that allows you to connect a computer to it so that these frequencies on the radio are constantly shifting as the satellite's going across the sky. So you'll see these things keep blipping as you're trying to make contacts, and as you spin this dial to catch whoever it is on the waterfall, the Doppler shift on the program will adjust automatically to whatever frequency you're trying to hit. So much easier than other ways of operating linear satellites, in my humble opinion. NU1U for ID. So other ways you can operate, and this is how mobile folks do it, is they stack a couple of half duplex radios. The Yaesu FT 817 and 818 are popular ones, and these ones I think are 6-watt max, and these works the linear birds great. You don't need all that much power to transmit and receive from a satellite. So what they do is usually on the VHF side of the house, they park it on a frequency and then they adjust Doppler on the UHF radio. So the radio that they're either listening or transmitting on, if it's on the UHF side of the house, that's what they're going to work in order to adjust for Doppler. It's a little bit harder than having a computer program, but if you're mobile, you can put both of these into a bag and hang it from the front of you, and you can set one to a frequency and then use the other one to adjust. And when you're mobile, usually you're roving and usually folks are coming to you, so you don't need to worry too much about trying to find yourself constantly on that linear bird. So what I mean when I say finding yourself, as we were talking about earlier, what you would do is, again, park yourself on a VHF frequency and then adjust UHF, that dial on the other radio, until you hear yourself. There's a couple of different ways to do it. I don't know what's the right way. You can whistle into the mic, which isn't great when folks are going through the passband, but it's quick and it's distinct. So you can definitely hear yourself. You don't have to scream. That whistle will be picked up easily in audio. The other way that you can do it is slowly call your call sign so you can find yourself. So for me, for example, it'd be going NU1U as I'm adjusting the dial, and usually other operators hearing that know that you're trying to find yourself and they're not going to come back to you. I've actually had a station come back to me when I was trying to find myself, and cool. If you find yourself in that time, you can start working the station. Another way to do it is have a half duplex transmit radio and have an SDR connected to your computer so that you're listening to the satellite as it's going by, and you're able to transmit on a transceiver. And because you're listening on your computer on your SDR, who cares about the listening on the actual radio that you're using to send up into space? So these are a couple of different ways that you can work linear transponders. And I'm going to go into some more equipment on the next slide. So I'm going to stop here and see if anybody's got any questions on the Zoom meeting. Okay, nothing heard. So again, the reason why FM satellites are the easy birds, most people already have the radios that you need in order to work an easy bird. Not everybody has radios that can do single sideband on UHF and VHF, and these radios happen to be more expensive than the FM radios. So it's a little bit of a barrier to entry when it comes to the linear satellites, but if you really like working satellites, I would highly suggest getting a radio that you can work linear birds. It's a lot less stress when it comes to trying to make a contact when you have a lot more passband. Well, you have more frequencies to use. Okay, so working satellites with antennas. You can use your HT rubber ducky antenna. You're not going to have a whole lot of luck, but it can be done. What you want to do is you want to get something that's a little bit more purpose built. The first two that I show on the left-hand side there are elk and arrow antennas. Those are the most popular commercial antennas that folks use to work satellites. I have an arrow antenna. It works great. I have the duplexer built in. You don't have to. I use the duplexer for my FM contacts when I'm using the HT. I do not use the duplexer when I have the 9700 hooked up to it. So I have cables that are hanging off of this thing that are connected to the duplexer that I do not use. But it's nice to have a duplexer in case I want to use the HT again. Moving on to the Eggbeater, that is an omnidirectional antenna that is circularly polarized. You don't need to move this thing in order to track satellites. I'm going to pause for the repeater. NU1U for ID. So as far as not moving goes, you're making compromises here. So it's an omnidirectional antenna, which means that it's going to transmit and it's going to receive in all directions. You might be able to hear the satellite all right. You might get some deadening as it goes over, and the same deal when you're transmitting. Because it's going at the signal's going out in all directions, you're going to need to turn up your radio in order to get the signal to turn up the radio, being turn up the power in order to get it to the satellite, because now it's not concentrated beam getting shot up to the satellite of RF. The other thing is when you're listening, again, it's going to be weaker. You have to use a preamp with this or you're going to have a bad day. At least that's what I'm told. I don't have one. What the goal is, if you're going to be stationary and you want to attach this to your house and you don't want to do what I do, which is go outside with the radio and the antenna in the middle of winter and catch satellites, is use a directional circularly polarized antenna. Now, I said circularly polarized already a couple times without explaining it. When you're trying to work a satellite and you're using an arrow or elk antenna, you need to spin that antenna in your hand such that it's pointing at the satellite in the same orientation that the satellite is pointing as it's transmitting. So what that means is that if the satellite's antenna is straight up and down, you want to have your antenna pointed in such a fashion so that you're receiving in the same orientation. If you are 90 degrees from the orientation of the antenna that's on the satellite, you've just introduced 20 dB of loss because now you're not of the same polarization. Going to be really hard, even if you're pointing directly at the satellite, to hear the satellite. You may not hear it at all. So you need to spin the antenna if you're using the arrow or the elk antenna to make sure you're in the right orientation. With a circularly polarized antenna, you do not need to do that because it's polarized circularly. It can send and receive such that you can get that signal without having to spin it to be in the right orientation. So with a directional circularly polarized antenna, you need to have something to move it so that you're pointing at the satellite. A rotor is what you would use, and that's shown at the bottom left-hand side. There's a couple of things the satellite operators do here. You can get one that does both the up and down and the side to side, the azimuth and elevation rotor, or if you don't have the kind of money to put into that, or you have a TV antenna or a TV rotor where it just does the back and forth, you can set your satellite antennas at a certain angle such that you know what birds you can work, you know how many degrees up in the sky they're going to be, and then you only work those. You don't need to worry about the up and down of the antenna to have the azimuth and the elevation rotor. You can have a simple rotor that just tracks it in whatever direction it's going. And the last thing that I show there is the preamp. So on the UHF side of the house, when you're receiving on the antenna, you want to pump the signal up so that it gets to your radio, because you're going to have some line in between you and the antenna that you have up on top of the house. So you want to have a preamp there. On the VHF side of the house, I don't think it's as big of a deal just because of the cable loss that you get, but I don't have this yet, so I can't tell you from personal experience. That's just what I've read. Any questions on antennas before I move on to the other recommended gear?
And I do have one more question on for the installations where you have you might want to put a tower and have this antenna set up in your house. I imagine two things. One is that you don't have to, a 100-foot tower isn't any better than a 20-foot tower, I guess. It's just a matter of getting access to the antennas. And do you always have to have a circularly polarized antenna then for a kind of a semi-permanent installation, because you can't twist them all, or do you have to have 3-axis control?
Okay, so the question from K1SEI was about antenna installs. The first being towers. So towers could benefit you depending on where you live and how much stuff is around you. If you want to work really low passes and you have really tall trees or mountains or whatever happens to be, raising that antenna is going to give you more visibility to the horizon so you can work a lower pass versus being down low and now you have maybe hills in the way or buildings or whatever. So a tower could help you depending on what your situation is. So the answer, like with all things satellite, is it depends. The other question was, do you need a circularly polarized antenna? The answer to that is no, but you're making a compromise. As the satellite's going across the sky, you are going to hear deadening and fading as the orientation changes. So if you have an antenna up on top of the house that doesn't have circular polarization and you just have it fixed in either horizontal or vertical, however you have it, you're going to have passes where it's going to be a challenge to work stations because you're going to hear them and then you're not going to hear them. So you can do it without a circularly polarized antenna.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Observation K1RCT.
All right, go for it.
Thanks. So I'm sorry if you covered this already, but on the Eggbeater antennas, and we have an Eggbeater setup at the EOC. Well, it's not up yet, but we do have the antennas. So for those antennas that have a little ground plane or radiation plane and the Eggbeater type of antenna setup, those are towards the horizon. They're horizontally polarized, but overhead they're right-hand circular polarized antennas, which is the right thing for satellites. So if you put that type of antenna up there, you just have to know that it's really conducive for satellite operations, whether it's FM or sideband type of emission. Most of the stuff that I've dealt with has been with handheld Yagis, like the Alaskan 2 is whatnot. But if you're dealing with an Earth station, an Earth transmitting station, receiving station, those are pretty much horizontal out to the horizon. And as that satellite climbs higher in the sky, it changes to right-hand circular polarized, which is the right thing for satellite operations. Just an observation. K1RCD back to net. I need to do this here. You guys hear that?
Yes.
Oops, sorry about that. I was on mute, I think. Yep, I was on mute. All right, so thank you again. And moving on, we're going to other recommended gear. Voice recorder. So on the IC9700, there is a recorder built in. If you're not using a radio that has a recorder, you need to get one. I mean, you again, there's so many things that you need to do right on a satellite pass. The last thing you want to do is have a pad and paper and writing down or having to remember who you made contacts with. So for the most part, when you're making contacts on a satellite, if you've made a contact, you're going to listen to that pass again because you need to now log your contacts. Well, you don't need to, but what's the point if you're not logging your contacts? So you have the voice recorder and you usually explain what pass you're on, plug it in, and you're good to go. You're able to make a contact. And even if you don't get the full call of a station and you're on an FM bird and it's very busy and you get the last couple of letters, you can, if that station's calling out to you, you can say, station ER, I got you on the recorder. This is blah, blah, blah on grid square, whatever. And you can continue it on. You don't need to actually call back the full call of the station as long as you have the recorder, because there's going to be very hectic and you're making contact. So you can say, I got you on the recorder. This is so-and-so, I'm in grid square, whatever. And then they'll come back to you. And that way there, you don't have to keep trying to, in your mind, pick out the letters. Because not only on a satellite contact are you getting call signs, you're getting grid squares too. So there's going to be up to 5 letters or numbered letter combinations that you're hearing, and then you're hearing grid squares on top of that. So now you need to subtract what's the grid square from the call sign. Gets very confusing. You're going to want a recorder. Moving on to the camera bag. As far as having my HT, what I do is I put my recorder in here. I put my phone on here so I can see where the satellite is on my app. And then I usually have the radio like right in the middle, and I'm able to change the frequencies on the UHF and have everything right in front of me. So I hang the bag in the front and I have this strap over my neck and I'm able to see everything. It's like a little table when you're mobile. A headset is a great idea to be able to hear the stations. You can crank it up and you can hear it versus having it out loud. And when it's full duplex, you don't want to have other stations listening to you talk to them. You could get some of that feedback from the audio if you're not wearing a headset. Headsets recommended. Headphones, if you don't have a headset that does both mic and speakers, then you can use the push to talk handset that is external, or you can use your radio. So I use, oh, I think we got somebody off mute. If you want to mute yourself, guys. Separate push to talk head for the headset is, or I'm sorry, separate push to talk for the radio is a good idea. For my IC 9700, I have a foot push to talk pedal so that I'm able to have both hands free. And then if I'm using my the HT, I have this adapter so that I can hit push to talk and I can use the speaker that's built into the headset at the same time. So that's all gear that I would recommend. Another thing that you might need is a headphone splitter. I use that so that you can get the output from the radio and shoot it into the voice recorder and then also hear it on the headset. Another good thing is if you have a buddy or a significant other that wants to hear the satellite pass or work the satellite if they have a license, you can both listen to the pass at the same time and then pass the mic back and forth if you want to make contact. So this is all gear that I would recommend to work satellites. You don't have to have them all, but it makes it easier. All right, so we're getting to the end of our presentation soon. Satellite tracking. These are all the ones that I have used and do use. There are more. So what you want to do is if you want to use cat control, SatPC32 is great. This website here is an online tracker that you can use. You can select the satellites that you want to see and it will track them, tell you how much time the satellite has left in the pass, how much time before the pass is coming up, and then what elevation it's going to be. So a whole bunch of good information on this website.
K1RCT.
K1RCT, go for it.
And have you ever used or looked at Orbitron?
I have not looked at Orbitron.
So the thing about Orbitron is it's a little piece, it's an application that's a little older, but you can update all of the keps on it, and I make my own file for Kepler, it's just because I only want the satellites that I can communicate. And it's a pretty good software. You can use it to control azimuth elevation rotors if you really want to. You can predict acquisition of signal, loss of signal, and azimuth or elevation, zenith, that's what they call it, is zenith. It's a pretty good piece of software that way. And it is something that I've always almost exclusively used from my home satellite station. I also use, it's an iPhone application. I'll think of it in a minute. Maybe I'll put it up later. Back to you from K1RCT.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And I am on a time limit tonight. I do need to get off of this at 9:30. So I'm going to try and get through the rest of the slides and questions in the next 25 minutes. Here we go, team. Am I on mute? No, I'm not on mute. Excellent. Heavens Above, that was the application that I was showing before on the phone. And then Ham Clock. Ham Clock is really cool. I have this on my TV where you use a Raspberry Pi, you download the image, and it will show you satellites on a big map on your television, and you can set up a whole bunch of stuff with your call sign, where you're located, and it can give you solar information and a whole bunch of other stuff. I really like Ham Clock, but for practicality purposes, you're looking at SAT PC, Heavens Above, the online tracker if you want. That's really these are the packages that I use. Again, there are others, it's just what I use. Okay, 2 more slides. We're going to talk about general etiquette when you're operating satellites, starting out with working full duplex. On FM, it is a great idea. You don't have to, but you don't want to be that guy that's just calling. You can't hear yourself, so you have no idea whether you're getting into the satellite, and you have no idea if you're going over the top of somebody. So it's a great idea on FM. When you're working linear, it's a must. You have to be able to find yourself, or else you could be calling onto the satellite and being at a totally different frequency than the guy that's trying to work you, guy or gal that's trying to work you. So you have a high desire for working full duplex when it comes to satellites. If you're on an FM satellite, keep your wow, I put transitions there. It's transmissions. So keep your transmissions brief on an FM satellite, because as you could hear from that clip that I played you, there's a lot of stations trying to work it. So you want to be as quick as possible, but you want to get your call out there so that you can, I'm getting ahead of myself here. When you put your call out there, phonetics on a satellite helps tremendously. If you rattle off your call and you're just throwing letters out there, folks might not be able to hear you because of the multiple factors we've talked about. And putting your phonetics out there, while it takes a slight bit longer to say them, you should do that because you have a higher probability that the station's going to get your entire call. Going to pause for the repeater. Okay. So same holds true on a linear bird if there's a pileup or if there's a grid square that a lot of people really want. Keep your transmissions brief, even though you have a passband to use now. A lot of stations might be working it. Now, if you're on there and you want to rag chew with somebody in their game and it's not a rare grid square or a pileup or whatever, you can go for it, because there's lots of, well, depending on what satellite you're on, there's lots of other band for other operators to use. So that's the deal with keeping transmissions brief. And the contacts on a satellite consist of your call sign and a grid square. That's usually the information that's given back and forth. Now, sometimes it can just be the call sign and you can log it and hope the other station logs it and you're good to go. But typically you're giving your call sign and your grid square. Next one's important. If you can't hear the satellite, do not transmit. I have recordings of stations who have been calling out on an FM satellite, cannot hear themselves, and they're just giving their call sign the entire pass. It's no fun for anybody who can hear the satellite, because all you're getting is someone who's rattling off their call the entire time. So if you don't hear the satellite, don't transmit. I found success on an FM satellite is if you don't just blind call. So don't just throw your call out there. Don't just go, this is NU1U, grid square, FM 31. I mean, you can, but If you want higher rate of success, find a station, pick a station, doesn't matter what station. Is you're listening to the bird is coming across the sky, you'll hear stations making contacts. Remember a call sign and then call for it. So if I heard the XYL on the satellite, KC1 MEB, this is NU1U grid square FN 31, and then she would hear her call, come back to me, and now we're making a contact versus I'm just throwing it out there. And now you have however many hams potentially responding to it. That usually doesn't go over. It's usually you pick a station, you try and contact it, and you make the contact. That's usually the etiquette on FM satellite. And as we talked about before, minimum power levels to make a contact. So you want to make sure that you don't overload the satellite or you're using up all of the power on a linear bird. NU1U for ID. Resources for satellites. These are the ones that I have listed. These are the ones that I've used. This is not an extensive list. This is just really good to know. AMSAT has a website. It's Amateur Radio in Space. Has a lot of good information. It has whether the sats are operational or not. It has a lot of frequencies. Whole wealth of information is on the AMSAT website. Twitter. Twitter is great for doing ham radio. I have a handle on there just for ham radio, and most of it is for satellite operations. So that's my call sign if you have Twitter and want to follow me. Some satellites actually have their schedule on there. So the PO 101 sat, that sat's not always on. So you need to know when it's on in order to work it. And they post their schedule on Twitter. Other things that are on there are roving announcements. So if you're looking for a certain grid and you're following a bunch of satellite operators and their favorites and likes, you might find the grid square that you're trying to work is going to be operated by a ham at a certain time. Make sure you're on that pass. So it's great to figure out how to fill up that map that I showed you earlier. There's a net for satellite folks, and it's on the DMR Brandmeister Talk Group 98006, which is how I kind of get on that net. There, you can also listen to it on Echolink, listen only on Echolink, and then there's a ASUS System Fusion reflector that you can also use as well. Those are bridged to the DMR Talk Group. It's Wednesday night at 10 p.m. You can just check in and out, or you can talk on it. It's a pretty relaxed net, and it's all about satellite operations. Satellite frequency cheat sheet. So those little snippets that I showed you, there's a whole cheat sheet with all of them that KE0PBR has created for you to download and use to operate and figure out Doppler shift. He also has a grid chasing guide. So pointers and further explanation that I haven't gone over tonight is on that blog that he posted. I think it's really great. It's worth checking out. And then KX9X is kind of like the satellite guy when it comes to showing people how to work satellites. He has a whole video series on YouTube that shows how to work satellites. I would highly recommend if you have an interest in satellites, you want something more in depth. He has snippets of videos that go more in depth than I went tonight for working satellites. And with that, everybody's good now. Everybody knows how to work a satellite. I am going to say, are there any questions at this time? And I'll then wrap up the RF side of the house.
Okay, Neil. I love that.
We're on the RF side of the house, so I'm going to wrap up the net on RF and then stick around for a few questions on Zoom. This is NU1U. Thanking all stations who have been monitoring this frequency. You have learned satellite operations 73, everyone. Please come back 2 Thursdays from now at 7:30 for another TechNet. Have a great night. 73, NU1U.
Sorry.
All right. So for those that are left, I have about 15 minutes to answer any questions if anybody has them, or general comments.
General comment. So yeah, what a fantastic primer on satellites. I consider myself an expert on satellites, but man, you just shadowed me. It's phenomenal. You really did a great job, Ant.
Thanks. Thank you
And
much.
yet-
I basically did a brain dump.
Yeah, that's obvious.
There's a lot of stuff I don't know, but the stuff that I do know, I have told everyone. So if you want to learn more about satellites, there's a whole slew of folks that know more than I do, and I would highly recommend checking out all the resources, rewatching this YouTube video to figure out what you missed, and then just do the research. But I mean, as far as getting into it, first thing I would do if you want to work satellites is get a satellite antenna, a directional antenna, and start with your HTs. Get on the FM birds. Listen first before you
Yeah.
start trying to operate it, just because it's a lot of bit intimidating if you don't listen and know the cadence first.
Yeah, you know what? That's the same advice we give people that are doing HF. Listen, listen, listen. You got to listen so you know how to operate, especially on satellites, because man, that transition is so fast. You know, when you give your call sign and you give up your grid square, it is so fast. Even though you may only have a 10-minute transition from acquisition to loss of signal, you may only have 10 minutes, but you can probably make a good 4 or 5 or maybe even more contacts. I think my phenomenal best record is 4 contacts on a 10-minute pass.
Yeah, it's you can make contacts really quickly in quite a few.
Yep.
The wife being on a bird, obviously female voice will make attraction, especially because it's very rare to hear one on a satellite.
That's right.
She made, I think, 9 on one pass, and then another.
Holy crap.
Yeah, well, yes, it's just,
that's phenomenal.
When she does her passes, it's RS-44. It's got the large pass band, and she can just sit there calling CQ, and that's without practice. When she gets better at it, I'm sure she could potentially make more.
So I have a question.
Go for it.
Hi, NA1CN, Chuck out of Norwich.
Hey,
I was wondering about if you were to use, well, I don't know, maybe a FT817 or even a couple of portables. If you were to set up like a quarter wave 2 meter and a quarter wave 70 centimeter antenna on a couple of mag mounts, do you think they'd fly? You know, would that be helpful, or how much? What kind of an angle do you think you would have to be within? You know, a 25-degree pass, a 30-degree pass.
So I haven't tried it, so I can't give 100% on this. But I would guess that you'd have to crank up the power a bit in order to get it to work, because you're not focusing that energy in the direction you want to. It's all around the antennas that you're building, so very little of it is going to be sent off to the satellite. Most of it's going to be sent in all directions. I'm not sure how much luck you'd have with that, but it would have to be a low pass, depending on how you orient the antenna.
NA1CN, I've got a comment, but I want to pass it by Ant for a minute. So I'm wondering, Ant, of all of the passes that you have made contacts on, can you give a percentage on which ones are directly overhead and ones that are way out towards the horizon?
So percentage of, what do you mean?
So you got 10 passes.
Yeah.
Of those 10 passes, which ones were directly overhead, or maybe better put, which ones were the best received overhead versus out towards the horizon?
So I like the passes that are over the ocean. for the FM birds. I like the passes that are over the ocean because you have a lot less hams that have access to the satellite at the exact same time. Obviously, it's going to be hard to make contacts inland doing that. But if it's down lower, off into the ocean, have a higher chance of getting contacts. And I usually pay attention to those. When it comes to linear satellites, it's really anything's game. And usually when I work them is just when I have availability. If it's midday on a Saturday or Sunday, that's usually when I'm working one of those satellites. And I don't care where it is up in the sky, because it's a whole lot easier to work those. As far as the quantity of contacts, you're going to get more opportunity to make more contacts because the pass is longer as it's coming up overhead. So I like those passes as well, but if you're chasing grids that are off to the west, you're going to need it lower off into the west. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I was just looking for some feedback because I'll tell you what my feedback has been every pass that I make that's off to the horizon and not overhead, I have greater contact with a lot of other amateurs on those contacts than ones that pass overhead. For some reason, those passes that go straight overhead are more populated and more difficult to make contact with other amateurs.
Yeah.
And you know, I could probably figure out why, but I don't care. I do it for the fun of it.
So
that's why I do it.
I would say if I had to wager a guess, if you're working the FM satellites, it's off to the horizon, you're getting it over the ocean where there's less hams, or you're getting it in maybe the flyover states, and so maybe there's less hams trying to get it out there. But like Ed said, also a matter of time is also how successful you're going to be, because if it's early morning pass, it might be you and one other guy.
Yeah, true. Anyone seeing? I think that does that answer your question?
Well, no, but that's I think his original answer kind of covered it. What I was just looking for is I was thinking on the omnidirectional nature of a quarter wave antenna mounted on the roof of a car. I'm not. I guess I would have to look at the table to see how much of the signal is getting squirted straight up into the air, which I guess I kind of figured would be helpful. You know, it wouldn't have the distance of a Yagi.
Yeah, like I said, the problem is that it's radiating in all directions. So you probably have to crank the radio up in order for the satellite to hear you. And then the same deal, you might not be in the right orientation of the satellite, so you might not hear the satellite. Your best bet is to get a lower pass with those satellites using an antenna like that.
Okay, thank you.
KC1HDB, you have a question?
Yeah, real quick, Ant, thanks. So I bought the Yaesu FT3D, right? And one of the reasons I bought it, I was watching reviews. A lot of people were using this for satellite because it has a built-in recorder.
Okay.
But after you started talking about full duplex, I was looking up the specs, and this does not have full duplex. So did I buy something that's going to be worthless for satellite?
No, just use another radio. So use that radio to receive, to listen, and then use another radio to transmit. You can get something super cheap, a Bofang if you want to transmit. You can get any other HT. Doesn't have to be the same HT that you have there. Just it's a matter of you have one that's on your hip, and you have the earphones in, and it's listening on the frequency that you need. And then you have the other one that you're transmitting on, and both of those have cables up to your antenna. And so you're using the transmit one only to transmit, and you're using your Yaesu to listen and record at the same time. Now, depending on whether it's UHF or VHF, you might have to adjust the listening frequency on the radio that's on your hip. That's what the camera bag's for. Now you have two radios in front of you, and you're able to adjust the Yaesu while transmitting on the other radio.
Got it. So real quick follow-up on that. I also have the Arrow Yagi, the same one that you were showing, the full duplex. So I just need a splitter for the two radios, right?
No.
No.
Nope. It's got two inputs. The Arrow antenna.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, all right. I was thinking about that wrong. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right.
it should have a duplex surrender.
Yeah, they're both connected. So I just need to unconnect one and put, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I can show you what it looks like.
No, I forgot it was had those two.
Okay, so coming to the camera here. Let's see, moving on up. You can see I have one connected and one not connected. This cable here that's connected is actually part of this system here so that I can do two different radios or two different inputs. The one that's off to the side is connected to my duplexer inside the handle that I don't use when I have that set up that way. So you have two radios. You're going to need two cables going into the two inputs on the antenna, one for UHF, one for VHF.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, no worries. All right, guys. I do have to run. I thank everybody who joined. I hope you found this super informative. And if you have any questions after this, Rob's going to post this on YouTube, and my contact information is on the video. So if you have any, actually, let me throw my contact information up real quick. I think I closed the presentation.
Thank you very much. Is the FB? I got a question. Yes.
Yeah.
Is FB Thursday night, 7:30?
It's every other Thursday night.
Okay. FB Thursday night or
Every other. So we won't have a TechNet next week. It'll be the week after.
okay? Thank you so much. I'm really interested. I learned a lot of stuff.
Good. Please come back.
Yeah, thank you as well. Good night.
No worries. Thank you. All right, guys. So I flashed my my information there. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to close out this this TechNet. So thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to stop the recording.